welcome back to Sean Clancy's ABCs, I believe is what it's called at the moment. Here on the New York Pro Scouts channel. Kristie, if you can see, this is my set for you.
Nice.
Yes.
I like the birds.
Yes, the birds and some sand art.
Nice.
You've been getting some beach photos in, so.
Yeah, that's all we have to do, really.
Exactly. Let's introduce ourselves. I'm Jesse Manning from Business Lunch Productions, and we are doing this show now every Monday and Thursday with very exciting people on Instagram Live. And today's guest is Kristie Ackert, who is a Yankees beat writer for the Daily News. You are a Dick Young Award winner for the Pro Scouts organization, which is very cool.
Very cool.
Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about yourself and how you got to get involved with the Scouts.
Well, I went to the first Scouts dinner in Long Island because I was introduced to that by Sean Clancy, which was very fortunate for me. But my actual first year of covering baseball, 2013, I got thrown on the beat like 7 days before spring training started. So I didn't know the ropes and I didn't know what was going on. And the first week of games, I got sent to a B game, which I had no idea what it was, on the backfields of Jupiter. And it was a Marlins game. And I went and I just sat down, and all the other writers kind of looked at me funny. And I was like, okay, I don't know what's wrong. But I had sat inadvertently in the Scout section. So all these guys kind of sat around me, and they were very nice to me, and they didn't kick me out, and they told me stories and gave me book recommendations. So from then on, they were kind of my favorite people in baseball.
And that isn't shocking. They tend to be some of the nicest people in baseball, too.
Absolutely.
And for everybody that's still joining in, I see Billy Blitzer's here, Gary Perone's here. You can use the question mark at the bottom. Hey, Billy, you can write your questions for me and Kristie, and we'll get to them over the course of the show. So, Kristie, you introduced yourself, but before we go any further,
okay.
You probably know this because you were watching the last one. There is a company that in minor league baseball helps to rename teams, takes some of the outdated names and gives them ridiculous names. So the Bowling Green Hot Rods. I just saw the Rocket City Trash Pandas is a new one, which is kind of funny. The Wichita Wind Surge. So can you give us, Sean Clancy's ABCs had a good run, but can you give the show a new name?
I think the one we liked the best was Quarantining with Kristie.
That's a great name. I like that a whole bunch. I think maybe people say they might be hearing you in your speakers. I don't know if that's possible.
How do I get rid of that?
Maybe just turn down the volume a little bit.
Let me try. Is that better?
Yes. Yeah, that sounds much better. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Quarantining with Kristie, I think, is a fantastic name. And we'll definitely go with that. I wish that could last, more than just the one episode. That's a good name.
Sorry, I'm going to have to turn it up a little bit.
Dan Palumbo's here. Hi, Dan. Yeah, no problem. It's Dan Palumbo's birthday, so we don't have to sing. Happy birthday to you, Dan. Yeah. So we've got our name for the show. We've got lots of exciting stuff to chat about, so let's get into it, if you're okay with that.
Let's go.
You are hysterical. You're snarky on Twitter. I've been checking out. Even today, you've been with penguins. That's why we have the penguins here. You were saying you were watching penguins.
Yeah, on the aquarium last night.
Yeah, which is, aquariums. Have you seen the videos of the puppies?
Yes.
In the aquariums?
Yeah, that's really cute.
So clearly it's working because you have like 13,500 Twitter followers to show for it. And in your bio, you proclaim yourself as Florida woman. And that is just Florida woman, period. So I know that was intentional. Can you explain to everyone first, you're not a woman from Florida, at least originally.
No.
How did a woman from Oneida, New York become Florida woman?
Well, when this whole thing started or hit us and put us in pause, I was in the process of becoming a Florida resident. So we have a place down in Florida now where I spent my entire off season. And so I kind of see myself as a Florida woman now, which I kind of find funny because, you know, some people think I'm a little different and a little Florida woman different. So I thought I'd put it in there.
And then obviously, or maybe it's not obvious, but I have to assume you know all about Florida Man.
Yes.
So for those of us who don't, can you give us a description of Florida Woman and how much more awesome she is than Florida Man? Can you talk about him as well?
I think Florida Woman still has an independent streak, probably a little different, but hopefully a little more law-abiding and not quite as crazy.
Or grimy, I think, is another.
Yeah, grimy would be a good one too. Not as grimy.
Florida Man's pretty grimy.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no, totally. And thank you. I think that you are a resounding example of what Florida Woman can be. So
I hope so.
Hi to Abby Armstrong. How are you? So while everyone's joining in, just remember at the bottom there's a question mark. You can use that and type your questions for me and Kristie as we go. We want to get some audience participation in. I actually added in a second rapid fire after looking at your tweets today. So you tweeted at Eric Borland, who's a Yankees Newsday beat writer, and you said that maybe some scout terms would be covered here because he, I guess, likes some scout terms. They're pretty folksy. So for those of you watching, if you want to type some of your favorite scout terms, but I have a couple I'm going to rapid fire to you. Maybe we can talk about what they mean.
Okay. If I know.
If you know, right. Well, we'll try our best.
Scout.
So the most applicable one to you is bird dog.
Oh, a guy who goes and finds talent.
There you go. Yeah. And
I passed.
You passed, yes. And why are bird dogs important to scouts and to the organizations? Do you know?
Because you need eyes everywhere and you don't want to leave anything unturned. And I think people forget that not everything can be covered by technology anymore. I mean, you need people to be out there and see what's going on.
All right, cross-checker.
Cross-checker is the guy that goes and checks out what the local scouts have seen, kind of, you know, consolidates all the reports, goes and checks and makes sure what has been reported is what they're seeing. Very
cool. Associate scout. You're doing great. This isn't really
someone who's not a full-time scout yet, working with other scouts, I think. I haven't dealt with too many associate scouts, but I think that's what it is.
Associate, my understanding is they're more of like a part-time scout helping out a full-time scout, and then bird dogs aren't technically employed by the club. It's sort of like friends in the areas that know the players well that help out a scout. That's my understanding.
It's my understanding too. It's a technical
we're on the same page.
term in terms of employment.
Exactly. Do you have any that you had in mind? What might he like?
Oh, you know, the funny thing about it is Eric and I always laugh when we go to Yankee spring training. There's a table in the back of the lunchroom. And I don't think the lunchroom's allowed to open until Billy Shear comes and sits at the table and then gathers all the scouts around him. So we always laugh because we hear the talk and we always joke about that and how, you know, it's funny to hear them talk about, you know, what tools a guy has or, you know, his heart or some things I probably can't say in public, but yes. And we enjoy that. And Eric and I, we get a big kick out of that.
While we're on the topic, I guess, of like funny scout things, do you have any old-timey scout stories that stick in your mind that people might want to hear?
That I don't, unfortunately. That was more Sean's area of expertise.
No problem.
I have more of the newer scouts, I guess. So I do have Billy Shear stories, I guess.
Do you have a Billy Shear? I'll tell a quick one that sticks out in my mind, and then if you want to tell a Billy Shear story quickly, that
okay.
So one that sticks out, old-timey scout, we were interviewing Susan Waldman about Tom Giordano. And so Joe DeLuca, who also just passed away, was a longtime member of the Scouts. They were seeing a prospect one time who they wanted to draft. And so they leave the house, they had a good meeting, and all of a sudden they hear the Dodgers came in the back door. They were working for, I don't know if they were at the Indians at the time, but so the Dodgers came in the house in the back door, and Tom And Joe say, this won't fly. So they go in the backyard, find a ladder. One of them climbs up, the other one's holding the ladder, and he's looking in the second story window trying to hear what the Dodgers are trying to tell the kid. So that's my old-timey one that came to mind. What about a Billy Shear story?
That one, I don't have anything compared to that. The only thing I have is my first experience with covering the Yankees. I moved over full-time last year. And I go to spring training, and I meet Billy, and, you know, how you doing? It's nice to meet you. And, you know, everybody's like, you know, Billy likes to talk a lot. I'm like, okay. So my boyfriend came, and he knows Billy, obviously. And he went down to the lobby to get change or something from the hotel, and he was gone for like an hour. And I was like, oh my God, something must have happened. So I go down to the lobby, and there he is with Billy. So that's my Billy Shear story.
There you go. That perfectly sums it up. Scouts they talk. They just talk and talk and talk.
And they have the greatest stories.
Yeah, exactly. So that was your first rapid fire. We'll do another, you know,
okay,
the more normal one, but you brought it up, so I figured we'd try it out.
Okay.
You went to Syracuse, and originally when you were starting out, you were working in Utica, and your goal, as far as I understand it, was to be writing about a Syracuse paper, or writing for a Syracuse paper about SU basketball. And you now are writing for the Daily News, which has a huge, huge subscribership every day, writing about the New York Mets and the New York Yankees. Did you ever see this happening? And can you talk to everybody about your ride?
No, I mean, honestly, that was my goal in life, was to be like the Syracuse men's basketball beat writer for the Syracuse Post-Standard. I thought that would be a really cool job and a lot of fun. And somewhere I just took a wrong turn. I didn't expect to ever be a baseball beat writer. I didn't grow up a huge baseball fan. There wasn't a lot of baseball where I grew up in Oneida, New York. So it wasn't really high on my radar. But when I got to the Daily News, and I started out by covering high schools, you know, the summers were free and they would send us to ball games, and I would go out and help. I mean, back in the day when we would cover baseball, we would have 3 or 4 people at a game. And, you know, I would generally be like the 4th person, but I enjoyed it. And the people there were really willing to teach me a lot. And 8 years ago, I had moved up to being the backup NBA writer. And I got called in the office, and I was assuming I got called in the office because I had written a bad lead about Kobe Bryant. And it turns out they were like, yeah, no, we think we want you to cover the Mets. And this was, I think, February 1st or February. Yeah, because spring training was early that year. And I was like, okay, sure. And it's kind of just grown from there. And it's not something I ever expected. But it's been fun, and it's been a challenge, and it's you know, it's really a big part of my life now.
That's super cool. When you were growing up, who was the team closest by? Was it the Sky Chiefs, or was it the Oneonta Tiger? Who did you root for baseball-wise?
It would be the Sky Chiefs. And there was a Penn League team in Utica, a New York Penn League team in Utica, but I don't remember them. I went to a few Sky Chiefs games.
They still play in the same stadium as like 100 years ago.
Exactly. I think they've tried to dress it up.
Now the Mets bought it, I think they probably have done something to it now.
I would be curious to see it. It's funny, right before I went on the beat, the summer before, the Yankees AAA team's stadium was being redone, and they were on the road for the whole year. So I went and did a week on the road with them. That's cool. And ended up like 4 days in Syracuse there. That place was interesting. Yeah, it could use an update.
100%. So we talked about how you got this far in your career, but talk about your relationship with Scouts now. So how do they help you as a writer, and how integral are they to your success as a writer?
Well, like I said, we need eyes everywhere. And they're very helpful to me because I see one team all the time. I don't necessarily see the minor league teams either. And you know, these are guys that I've developed relationships with, who I trust. I trust their judgment. I trust you know, what they see. They're great because they'll tell you what they've seen, what's going on. They're very good about, like, if I have questions. I mean, particularly when I first started, there's a lot of intricacies to covering baseball that you don't necessarily understand as a fan, like,
Totally.
you know, options and stuff like that. Scouts are guys you can call up and be like, I don't understand this, and they'll tell you, and there's no judgment there, and you learn from them. They have been the people that have helped me learn about baseball probably the most. You know, they're very helpful. I mean, I can't tell you how many times they'll be like, hey, you know, I heard this over there, and maybe it's not always something that's relevant, but you can check it out, and it's good background. It's a good way to find out what's going on across the league. I mean, I'm always happy when it's time. It's the time of the year when the scouts are coming in to the stadium. There's times when you don't see them, and when they come in, it's great because it's like the community of baseball comes back, and you can hear what's going on in different outposts.
Totally. And I feel like for anyone that understands like the international market and all the rules, like you need a PhD. So having people at your disposal who can explain these like incredibly intricate things is
oh yeah. And you know, it's just great because you can kind of, I mean, a lot of times I have scouts that I just bounce ideas off of. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about writing, you know, about this trend in baseball. Do you think this is a good idea? You know, and they're great.
Do you ever find that you're writing about potential trades, or I know like I've seen a lot of writers, they'll concoct trades or things like that. Do you do that? And if you do, are you like bouncing those ideas when you play GM off of scouts?
That's one thing I don't do a lot of. And I wonder if it's because I didn't grow up like a huge baseball fan playing, you know, Stratomatic or whatever. I'm not a huge junior GM person. During the trade deadline period, I am talking to scouts probably every day. And just, it's not just, you know, what are you hearing? It's also, do you think this makes sense? How does this make sense? What do they have in their system that I'm missing, and stuff like that? So yeah, I mean, scouts know the most about what's going on generally.
100%. So I now want to take you back to December 2016. You wrote a pretty beautiful column about Claire Smith's induction to the Baseball Hall of Fame. And she received, it's called the J.G. Taylor Spink Award for the media when they get inducted, for those out there who maybe aren't the biggest baseball people. So you wrote, Tuesday morning, as she stood in front of a large group that is and has always been predominantly white and male, Smith was honored for so much more. I was one of 5 women, all the other female BBWAA members in the room, who Smith called up to stand behind her. It was kind, generous, and very aware. None of us would have been here as members or working at the MLB winter meetings without Smith and her peers breaking through the clubhouse doors over 3 decades ago. Well, first reading that, what's your initial reaction hearing that read to you?
I was just thinking about that morning and being there and how excited I was for Claire. It was a really big moment for her. And, you know, it was a big moment for a lot of us. I stood up the day that Marley Rivera, you know, nominated her for that award. And that was a big moment. You know, she's the first woman ever to go in. And, you know, it was a big moment of kind of acknowledgement that, okay, you know, this happened and she's a part of history.
Can you talk about what she had to go through a little bit? Because, I mean, you wrote the column, you clearly know. So talk for people who don't know what she had to go through to get there in her career.
Well, when she started out, women were not allowed in the clubhouse. I forget the names, and in part, I forget the names of the people who were bad to her because I don't really want to remember them.
They don't matter.
They locked her out of the clubhouse. They physically removed her from a clubhouse when she was talking to people. You know, it's not always easy being a woman in baseball still. It is, I mean, 90% male. But I've never had to deal with that. She and women of her generation, there was about 4 or 5 of them that really kicked the door open, and they did it with a grace and patience that I'm not sure a lot of us would have. And if they hadn't done it with that professionalism and grace, we certainly wouldn't be here. And now I'm on a beat, and Susan Waldman is included in this. You know, she's not a writer, but she's a huge influence. And now I'm on a beat with, you know, there's 4 other women that we benefit from that. You know, I think even with the Mets, I think they would feel it was a little unusual not to have a woman in the clubhouse because they got so used to it. For the Yankees, there's 4 or 5 of us every day, and it's nothing. I mean, nobody really notices it.
And Susan's background's pretty cool too, because she came from theater, right?
Yeah, she's had an amazing life. Absolutely. One of the most interesting lives in baseball.
And grew up a Red Sox fan, which is the best part. Her hero was Ted Williams, and then now she's the Yankees radio announcer. So
she's one of the faces of the Yankees, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So on that topic, so it's been 36 years since Claire Smith had that with Garvey outside of the clubhouse, that incident, and then it's 4 years. Yeah, no, do you need to correct me?
No. What I should have said too is, you know, even when they were going through that, and this is something I've found too, you always found allies in some of the players and some of the scouts and some of the managers and coaches. There's always 1 or 2 people that were there. And Steve Garvey deserves a lot of credit for going outside and making sure she got whatever she needed to write a story just as good as the guys in that clubhouse and fighting for her and standing up for her. So I'll forget the names of the guys who were nasty to her, but Steve Garvey is somebody that should be remembered. You
remember the good people. And I think that kind of, we'll talk in a minute or in a couple of minutes about the pandemic and all of that, but all of the good is what you're remembering and how people make you feel and all that. So
yep,
100%. So it's been 4 years since you wrote that column. Have things progressed for women in baseball, and why is it so important to talk about this still and bring it up and, you know, have more representation in the game?
I think you should have more representation in the game because the game is loved by women and men. I mean, there's a lot of women that love this game as much as men. And why should you shut out half the population from, you know, participating in it? Is it any better? You know, I can't. There are idiots that you have to deal with. I mean, let's be fair. There's always somebody that's going to tell you you don't know what you're talking about because you're a woman. But at the same time, it's nothing. I can't complain about it because I know what Claire and Susan and all of them went through. So it's not that bad. I mean, I will get a little snotty with some guys on Twitter. There's no doubt about that. But, you know, and then part of that is because I feel like, you know what? They don't really have, I really don't want to let them out there with, you know, putting that energy out there after Claire and them fought for that. So, but it's not as bad. There's nothing near as bad as what they went through.
And as far as the league goes, what excites you about what they're trying to do and how they're trying to make themselves more accessible for young girls and for everybody?
Well, I think it's pretty cool. I mean, I've had some interesting talks with Jean Afferman, who's one of the highest ranking women in baseball and who has been for a while. And she's very encouraged by the fact that analytics let a lot of women in. You know, we've seen some women scouts. I mean, we've seen, you know, women come into the game and be appreciated for what they can do. The Yankees just hired a minor league hitting coordinator, you know, to coach guys on how to hit. And the funny thing about that was very little was said about it this spring. She just did her work, which is what a lot of us just want to do. I mean, we don't really want to talk about being women all the time. We just want to do our job. So, you know, I'm excited to see that there are more women around the game. Coming over to the Yankees after covering the Mets, it was like night and day. There were women there all the time. So it was like, wow. It was really good. It's good to see, and hopefully we'll see more.
You make a good point that it's definitely not something, I'm sure it gets tiring to talk about. So what excites you now that you switched over from the Mets beat to the Yankees beat? What's something that just excites you about going to work every day when you are allowed to go to work every day?
I miss going to work every day. I mean, I think there's same things as going to the Mets. You never know what you're going to see. You never know what you're going to write. I mean, things could get, maybe my first full year on the Yankees was a little bit crazy with, so many injuries happening during the season. Yeah. It was a little bit like, wow. I mean, I like the fact that I don't know what I'm going to write. I like the people I work with. I mean, the beat's really fun. The people have been great. I've enjoyed it. I mean, and the same thing though with the Mets. It was, there were people there that were really great to work with, and there was always something different to write about. Yeah.
The Mets especially seem to always find a way to give you something.
Yeah.
Were you were writing when Kevin Plawecki had the thing in his locker, I assume?
I was off that day.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I got a lot of text messages that day. I was actually off that day.
Are there any, I think, and for those of you who are joined in, thank you so much for being here. Type your questions in if you want in the thread, or there's the little question mark at the bottom if you want to ask Kristie or myself questions. What's a Mets story that's just like Mets being Mets? What sticks out? Any in your head that's just like, man, they just don't make it easy on themselves?
Let's see. Well, I wasn't there. I mean, I guess the last weekend of Terry Collins' managerial career, when it just became a absolute crap show. They honored, they honored the parking lot attendants in his last game at Citi Field and wouldn't mention anything about his future. He's just kind of standing there watching, parking lot attendants and ticket takers get honored. And it just devolved into Sandy Alderson having to come down and make a statement and then make another statement. The Mets are interesting. They're interesting to cover. There was always a good story coming. You always knew there'd be a story. And it would probably not be one you expected to be writing that day.
I like that. All right. So now we're on to the other rapid fire. So I kind of make these up as we go.
Okay.
I'm going to give you some things and you tell me what your favorite is. So what is your favorite fruit?
Blueberries. Is that a fruit?
It is. Yeah. It's
okay.
My favorite fruit too. So I back you up on that one.
Okay.
Favorite sport growing up?
Playing was tennis and watching was basketball.
Okay. Favorite player in both of those sports and why?
John McEnroe, because I thought he was fascinating and talented, interesting, and Michael Jordan, because he was Michael Jordan. He was incredible.
Favorite cereal?
Oh, this is going to sound weird, but grape nuts.
Have you ever had grape nuts ice cream?
No. They haven't?
It's very good, yes. It's
Where do
like
they have
a
it?
niche favorite.
Okay.
I don't know. Oh, here, Billy Capola sent one in. Best, worst press lounge food.
I always like Philadelphia press room food, probably because I forget his name, but the guy used to push ice cream on you every day, and it was really Frank. Yes, thank you, from the sidelines. The worst press room food, honestly, Atlanta SunTrust Ballpark was probably some of the worst I've ever had. The Rockies were down there. I guess Yankee Stadium is pretty decent. So
it's New York. It's like we're a culinary mecca. They kind of have to do a good job, or they'll get panned for it.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Abby's from Philly, so she appreciated the shout out there on the Philly food. And as far as the grape nuts ice cream goes, I can't think of the brand, but if I'm going to find out, I'll let you know because it's great.
Okay.
Clubhouse Gal. Do we know who Clubhouse Gal is?
Yes, I do.
favorite New York City watering hole?
Oh, I think she wants me to say Foley's.
I think you, in the same way that Sean, during Sean Clancy's ABCs, would have gotten in trouble had he answered who his favorite sports writer was and it wasn't you, you may get in trouble vice versa if you didn't say Foley's.
I think he actually was going to say Pete Caldera, but, you know.
He said you anyway, so he overcame the... And then I talked to Billy Blitzer afterwards, and he said the same thing. He's like, I think he was going to say Pete, and then he knew he'd get in trouble.
He wouldn't have gotten in trouble.
So that was your second rapid fire. You're doing great. You've made it through a ringer here. Gonzo says that's right, Foley's. We got Foley's fans in the crowd.
A few, huh?
So this has been a tough time with the pandemic going on for everybody, and the world has changed. You have taken up an affinity for bird photos. You said you got a new camera. Is that a new phone or like an actual DSLR? Or?
Well, actually, I do have a new phone, but I got a new camera. I had gotten a gift certificate for a camera for Christmas, and so I just went and bought a new. It's pretty simple, but it has a nice lens on it and stuff. So I've been taking pictures. Yeah,
they're awesome. I like bird photos, and I was saying, when I go out, we're shooting a documentary or something. If we're in Florida, there's birds everywhere. So
wild birds, like really weird looking birds.
Yeah, weird looking birds. Ibis security guards at Yankee Stadium, they just swarm around you over there in Tampa. The ibises. So I always make them go get videos of birds. So I'm on board with that. That's one of the hobbies you've taken up. What are some of the best things that have happened to you since you started to social distance and deal with all of this?
Well, to get out of the house, we started walking pretty much every day. I think I did 50 miles last week walking. Wow. Well, there's nothing else really to do. We've ridden our bikes. I mean, I would say it's great being home and spending time.
Abnormal, right? That's not like a usual thing at this time of year.
It's so unusual, though. I mean, I don't. It's funny because when we are during the season, at this point in the season, I would be tired because I would be getting ready for the second road trip, and I would have been on a road trip home for like 6 days and then getting ready to go again. And I know I'd be tired. I know I'd be a little cranky right about this time. Right now, I would kill to be tired and cranky from covering baseball. I mean, it's funny because I call people every day to try and come up with a story, and every baseball person I talk to is like, so weird being home. I mean, it's just, we're not used to this lifestyle. It's like an extended off season that's gone awry.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, totally.
And it's funny because I noticed, and this is a challenge for you, I noticed on Twitter that there's a new account called Scouts Cooking.
Oh,
so
no.
all these different scouts are posting pictures of things they've cooked because they've never been
rolling
home
over in his grave that he's not alive right now to be the star of Scouts Cooking.
But this is fascinating to me. They're all like, well, we're bored, we're home, we'll cook. So I think that's cool.
I think that's awesome. Yeah, I got to check that out.
It's very good.
For the scouts that are on here, are you cooking now? And if you have questions, guys, like I was saying, just post them in the bottom. You guys got really great involved, and gals getting involved with the last segment. So let us know what your questions are. Yeah, T-Bone would have been 100%. So what are you doing to write? You know, you still have to make stories to a certain extent. How are you doing that when there's not a lot going on?
The first week, we were still going over to the complex. So we would stand on the sidewalk, and as players drove in or out, they'd stop and talk to us. So that was good in a way because it gave me something to do. Now we are under a shelter in place here and in Tampa as well. So didn't feel safe standing out on the corner. They're actually doing coronavirus testing in the lot right next to the Yankees minor league facility. So it was a little weird. It was a little.
Is that the big grass field there?
Yeah, yeah. It's actually parking for Raymond James Stadium, but they were doing it there, and the first time I saw it was kind of like, remember that movie Outbreak or whatever
Yeah.
it was? It kind of looked like, or when like they brought the people in to examine E.T. So I kind of was like, well, we're not going to do this anymore. So it's basically phone calls, trying to reach out to people. You know, the same people you talk to in the off season. The Yankees have been good about putting together a conference call once a week.
Nice.
You know, just looking for different stories. I've talked to a lot of scouts. You know, just try and keep going.
Do you feel like because you are spending more time having these conversations with people and furthering those connections, when the season starts, you'll have better friendships or people you can rely on that like you maybe couldn't because of how hasty it is in the past? Or
I don't know. I mean, there's a few people that you probably connected with a little more than I had. I mean, this is also my first off season with the Yankees, so
right.
Different people. The one thing I did find interesting is we all know each other as baseball people, and you know, we all talk about things that we know about baseball, but everybody's talked about family, everybody's talked about health and how are you doing. So it's kind of like, I think people have become a little more personal. You kind of know a little bit more about their families and what's going on with them. So that's kind of nice.
Do you see the question that just came in?
I can't actually read it.
It says, which member, M. Markovitz says, which member of the Yankees beat? Do you miss
I'm gonna say Meredith and Susan for that one.
And you can't say no one, right? So there you go. You answered that straight away. And we've got a comment that says, distancing from my wife will add 10 years to my life.
Oh, okay.
The consummate jokester, Billy Capola. Oh, they miss you too.
Aww.
This is sweet. So, all right, now we're up to baseball cards. So I'm going to show you a couple of cards, and then you're going to do your best to describe what comes to mind about these people. Brett Gardner, who I think is the longest tenured Yankee right now.
Brett's funny, actually. I like Brett. I mean, I love that he is like a hard-working baseball player, like blue collar, bring your lunch pail to work, just grinded out baseball player. And it's funny because everybody talks about how he's like a home run hitter now. Because he had a lot of home runs last year.
Everybody is too.
Right. But what I like about him is if you watch, if he gets 2 strikes, he goes back to being the hitter he's always been. So he's a good hitter. And he's a good guy. It's funny because last year, you know, being my first year in the clubhouse, he was one of the guys that went out of his way to be pretty nice to me and make sure I was doing all right on the beat. So I like Brett a lot. He's a good dude.
That's awesome. All right, next one we mentioned before. We've got Terry Collins. This is a pre-rookie Terry Collins Buffalo Bisons card.
Wow.
This one just showed up. I saw it. I was like, I got to ask about this one.
I'm sorry?
I said this one, when I was looking through, I just found this. I didn't even know I had it. I was like, this would be a cool one. So
Terry was the first manager I covered. And it's funny because his public persona is this, you know, scrappy, rough, you know, cripes guy. I love covering Terry. He was hilariously funny and actually very nice, very fair to me. And he also was a guy, and I was very lucky that my first team, I had this. He was a manager you could go into and say, I don't understand why you made this move. And it wasn't a challenge to him. It was, he would say, this is why I did it. This is what it was supposed to work out to be. This is how it went wrong. And he'd be like, you understand? I'd be like, yeah. And you would learn from him. So I owe Terry Collins a lot. And I think he was a really, really much better manager than people gave him credit for. I think you saw that after Mickey Callaway's 2 years.
Can you talk about, just briefly, to have that in a manager, to have someone who likes the media or is willing to work with you because they see the value in what you're doing? And can you just talk to that a little bit?
Well, there's a huge value there. And it's a value for the team, too, because if you look at Terry Collins' tenure with the Mets, he took a lot of bullets for that organization.
Mm.
There could have been a lot of scandals that didn't turn out to be scandals because Terry sat there and was like, okay, yep, this happened. I'm sorry. This is what's going to happen next. Da, 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 da. You didn't hear as much, you know, he took every day, he took bullets for that team. Where it's a benefit for us is, you know, I didn't come into this as pretending to know more about baseball than the people who's their profession. Mm. I'm here to learn, and he taught me, and he was willing to teach you. He was willing to talk to you, and you know I can't thank him enough for that, because I wouldn't know what I was doing, you know, now. But the thing the other thing about this is, you know, we start seeing those guys in mid-February. We don't leave until October. We see them before the game for an hour. We're in the dugout. We're in the clubhouse for spring training. You're going to see us every day. It makes your life a lot easier. Makes our lives a lot easier if it's a pleasant experience.
Totally.
You know, you look at a guy like David Cohn. He was good with the media as a player. It probably extended his career a year. Yeah. And look at the career he now has in the media. You know, he was just a really good guy to the media.
That's awesome, and a really good point. And Sarah Isabel V, I see your question. So as soon as we're done with baseball cards, we'll do Sarah's question. Next one, speaking of players now in the media, Mark Teixeira.
Mark was a machine. Let's put it that way. He played like a machine, and he was very mechanical in talking to him when I covered him as a reporter. He was fair, and you know, he was professional to deal with, is what I would say. It's interesting to see him have opinions so much now, because he didn't when he played. Yeah. But you know, he was always fair and decent to deal with.
Awesome. Next one, former Met and Yankee. They're wearing a Tigers uniform and head of the Players Association, Tony Clark. What do you think about what they're doing and all that?
I like Tony. I think Tony's got a tough job ahead of him. Negotiating this standstill has been hard. You know, he's got players that want to play and who would probably like to get a paycheck. Yeah. But they also have to understand the owners are losing a lot of money. I think he had a tough job before this happened, because I don't think the CBA they got the last time was as good as they thought it was. And I know that they were bucking up for a fight. So Tony's got a tough job ahead of him. Very nice man, and a lot of players like him.
Yeah, and he was around the game forever, too. He played a long time. Last one, Johan Santana. Only no-hitter in Mets history, maybe. I'm not sure if it actually counts, but...
We should ask Adrian Johnson, shouldn't we?
I guess so.
And when we do that, can I put a shout-out for Umps Care?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So Johan was still on the Mets my first spring training, and perhaps my worst day in my first spring training was sitting around waiting to find out if he had hurt himself. And I'll just remember not sitting because we don't sit, but standing in the clubhouse for about 2 hours, and just the pall in the clubhouse kind of, I mean, I wasn't that experienced, but you could kind of feel that something was going on, and it probably wasn't good. That's pretty much my biggest memory of him. I was actually covering hockey when he threw the no-hitter, and I was coming back. I was covering the Devils, and they were in the Stanley Cup final. And I remember getting on the train from Newark to go back to my apartment in Manhattan, and I was listening to the game on the radio. And so I got back to my apartment. I'm like, well, you know, I know how important this is. And I adored Jay Horowitz, and I knew that this would be big to him. So I remember I came into my apartment. I went to turn my TV on because I wanted to make sure I didn't jinx them.
2 more questions. One is Hall of Famer, yes or no, on Johan?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, it's a good answer. And Jay Horwitz, I believe, was described by David Wright or someone as the best butt dial of all time. He used to butt dial the players or something like that. I have my own fun Jay Horwitz things from over the years, but anything that sticks out about him?
Actually, I adore Jay. And I mean, Jay is a much better PR person than people let on. He has an affable way about him. Can he mistakenly dial you once in a while? Yeah. But you know what? He also dialed me 2 weeks ago to see how I was holding up during this. So
awesome.
Yeah, he's a very sweet man. Jay was very well liked by David Wright, beloved, I would say, probably by most of the older Mets, and is really missed in their organization in terms of PR.
So you are, I believe, on the Syracuse Newhouse School's notable alumni page. It seems that someone who was going to school at one point, Sarah Isabel V, says, "You once told my SU sports writing class you learned more about players staying away from the bigger reporter scrums. How have you made connections with the Yankees now, going on your second year?"
Well, one of the things actually Claire Smith told me when I first got my first beat, when I did the Mets, talk to everybody. And she meant it. She said, talk to everybody. Make sure you talk to the guys that play once a week as much as you try to talk to the guys who play every day. So I kind of do that. You just walk around and say hello to people, and you never know who you're going to hit it off with. I think my first connection with the Yankees was Aaron Hicks, really, because he grew up with Travis d'Arnaud, who I knew from the Mets. So it carries over team to team, and Claire gave me the best advice ever covering a baseball team, is just talk to people.
Kevin Kiernan was talking about Travis d'Arnaud and Chase d'Arnaud and their dad, and saying it's like the greatest family ever when he was on the other day. Did you get to know Travis well, or?
Very well. Travis, my first year with the Mets was Travis's first year with the Mets too. So his locker was kind of the first locker to the left when you would come into spring training, and spring training mornings can be really early. So I would tend to lean on the wall right next to his locker. And we kind of just came to an agreement that that's where I was going to lean. So we would talk every day. I'm very fond of Travis. He's one of the nicest people in baseball. I'm very happy for him. So happy for him that he's done well. Actually, I saw him the Sunday before the season was banged. They came up, well, not banged, postponed. They came up, he's with the Braves now, they came up, and it was nice. I got to chat with him about his daughter, and it was nice.
Kevin said that he's happy because he's probably now, the Mets in Kevin's opinion, he gave up on him a little early. What's it going to feel like if he succeeds with the Braves? Are the Mets fans going to be like, oh, another one?
Absolutely. Of course. That's what Mets fans do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to have it tough. If Zach Wheeler comes back into Citi Field and shoves, that's going to be a hard one to swallow. Travis, I understand the frustration with Travis. He had struggles with the Mets. I do think it's a little hard to cut him after you give him a contract after 25 at-bats.
Yeah.
So, I'm happy for him. He's really happy where he is, so we'll see.
Very, very good. If anybody else has more audience questions, we got a lot of good ones with you actually today. Or is there anything before we get into our final question, things that you might want to talk about or look out for in the Mets season this year, the Yankees season this year? No, it's both. You got to know both teams pretty well.
I'm actually very curious. I'm very curious to see Garrett Cole fit in. Obviously that's very obvious. I wrote about it today. I'm very interested to see how Gleyber Torres does and whether the Yankees gambled right there. The Mets, so many of them are not there from when I covered them now. Zach and Travis were big parts of who I knew in that clubhouse. Obviously, I covered DeGrom. It'll be interesting to see if he can keep up his, dominance. I have a feeling he will. But, and the whole Noah Syndergaard thing is very, very fascinating.
We got another good one from Sarah Isabel V. What is it like switching from the Mets right to the Yankees in the middle of the season?
That was actually really hard. That's very difficult. I mean, we have, you get very used to your life and the people you're around all the time, and then suddenly you were thrown into a totally different world. I remember going over there and being like, okay, so, I mean, I knew their players, obviously, but it was like, I had no idea. You knew to look for things with the Mets, just having been around them so much. It was very hard to adapt. But
so you're sort of like a fish out of water in that situation. How do you make inroads? Because you're on the level with these people, but they're still big sports TV people. You don't necessarily know them. So what is it like as just a human thrown into a new situation? What did you do?
You go over and you say hello, and you try to find connections, which actually helps. Like Aaron Hicks with Travis d'Arnaud.
Yeah.
Neil Walker was on that team.
Yes.
And that was huge for me. Neil Walker was on that team, and he was very helpful. The other thing that was very nice and very helpful is the old Mets hitting coach, Pat Rossler, had been with the Yankees for years and years. And he had, I got moved because we had layoffs. He was worried about me. He actually, next time he saw me, how are you? What's going on? Can I help you? And I said, well, I'm getting moved over to the Yankees. If there's anybody over there that you can put me in touch with. He actually reached out to a few of the coaches and said, look out for her. She's a good kid. So awesome. I was very grateful for. That helped quite a bit.
More informative, Brody or Cashman is a question.
Oh, Cashman, hands down.
That was it. That was a quick answer.
Hands down.
I think that's really cool what you were just talking about. And what advice would you give to a young aspiring sports writer that's getting into the field? What's your go-to? People like advice. So.
Well, this field is hard to be in right now. So write as much as you can. Find a place where you can write as much as you can. And the best advice I can give you is what Claire Smith gave me. And it goes for anything, too, is talk to as many people as you can. It doesn't have to be baseball players. It can be, guys around the ballpark, other writers. Just introduce yourself to as many people as possible and talk to them, and they can help you. If they can help you, they will. Yeah,
that's cool. I got that advice once. I was working on a political campaign, and they said you have to be willing to ask. People want to help you, but they don't necessarily know you need help. Just ask, and the worst thing that can happen is they'll say no.
Right, and I've found it within, particularly baseball, most people really don't say no that much. So
yeah, people like to talk about baseball.
They love to talk. So you've got a head start there.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention earlier when Billy Blitzer said he can't even boil water. When we were talking about scouts cooking at home, which I think is pretty funny. I saw Billy's name come up. Someone asked earlier, what are you having for dinner?
Pasta.
A specific type?
I'm having linguine with clam sauce.
Ooh. That's nice. And then final audience question. What does it mean for both New York teams going into the season, each with new additions from the Astros?
Well, for the Yankees, it means they have probably one of the best pitchers in the game. For the Mets, I don't really know. I mean, I understand the question in terms of the fact that there's been so much controversy with the Astros. I kind of feel like maybe, being in a global pandemic kind of mitigates that a little bit. I don't think we've been talking about it.
Off the hook, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, Obviously, if we get back to normal and we get a good semblance of a baseball season, I'm sure there will be people that'll be very willing to, boo the Astros and perhaps Garrett Cole and stuff, but not really high on the radar right now.
Totally. All right, last question for you. We ask everybody, what does baseball mean to you?
Well, it's become a large part of my life, but it means community, and it means people that you see all the time that, maybe we've taken for granted that I really appreciate more now because we don't get to see them all the time. But it means community. I mean, I can't tell you, how many people, it's a huge community. It's not just the players, it's not just the managers, it's not just the other writers, it's the scouts, it's the clubhouse guys that it's the umpires that it's the sports bar you go to talk about baseball. It's a big, huge community of fans and everybody, and I miss it a lot right now. Very,
very well said. Community is such a good word for it. And once you're in the community, you're in it for life, I think.
I think so.
Do you have anything you want to add before I close it up here?
Just hope everybody's staying safe, and I hope we all meet again at a ballpark near you.
Love it. You're good at this. We're going to have to do this again. Maybe you could take my job. I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
For the, we called this Quarantining with Kristie. Great title for the show. For the New York Pro Scouts, for Business Lunch Productions, I'm Jesse Manning. Thank you so much to New York Daily News Yankees beat writer Kristie Ackert and New York Pro Scouts Dick Young Award winner. We're very happy to have you as a part of that fold.
I'm very happy to be in it.
Thank everybody so much for joining us, and yeah, we will see you again on Thursday.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Kristie. Thank you.
Bye.